Okay, so in this lecture, I'm going to cover Coursework 3, which is a single-page web application. And the reason I'm covering Coursework 3 early on in this course is because it's a piece of coursework that you can start any time after you've completed Coursework 1. Whereas Coursework 2 is a group project that will take place in the spring term, whereas you could start Coursework 3 in week 3 if you've been really quick with Coursework 1, for example. So I'm going to start with a short introduction, explaining what the project's all about, explain how you submit your projects, how they'll be assessed, and just a little bit of some suggestions to get you started with ideas. So Coursework 3 is worth 20% of the mark for the module. It's an individual project, and the deadlines are end of week 20 is the latest possible time that you can submit the project proposal. As I'm going to explain, I recommend you submit it a lot earlier than that. And the final project submission is early May. So as I've said in previous lectures, these deadlines vary, the exact dates vary year by year, and the exact dates are available in the full project description, which I'll show you a bit later. So many websites work as a single page. Similar to a GUI written in Java, Python, C++, etc. So if you're working in JavaFX, you might build a GUI, and you click on a button, up comes a dialog, and you close the dialog, and maybe the GUI will change, like Microsoft Word, for example, being a good example of that. So that's that's a standard sort of desktop application. Now, there's many websites that work in the same way, that you have just a single web page, and then your interactions with the browser, with the page, generate dialogues or change the content of the page, but it's still essentially just one page that's being changed in different ways. Now, many websites work in this way. So JavaScript's changing the contents of the page, and at the back end, we're still using a server, we're still using a database, but JavaScript's talking to the server without reloading the page. So with a traditional website, you click on a link or whatever, and it'll reload the page completely. With this kind of website, it's JavaScript using Ajax or WebSockets or something like that to pull data from the server, and then it's changing the contents of the page dynamically by manipulating the HTML. So a good example is like the core functionality of Gmail and Facebook. So this is a screenshot from the internet, not my Facebook profile, hasten to add. But if you look at a Facebook page, there's an awful lot of functionality you can do within a single page without reloading it. Now, if you click on, I think, Olina, that's like then that's a separate web page. But within the home tag, you can send messages, you can view the feed, and the feed will be loaded dynamically in the background by JavaScript. You can like things, unlike things, write comments or whatever. All of this functionality exists within a single HTML page. Same with Gmail. For sure, when you click on some kind of settings thing, you'll be taken to a different page. But the core functionality of Gmail, it's all within a single page, right? It'll just dynamically, behind the scenes, the JavaScript will be loading up your new messages, displaying them there. And then when you write a new message, JavaScript will do a sort of pop-up box here. This is mostly just JavaScript functionality with a single piece of HTML, single HTML page again. Now, all the HTML is doing really is it's linking to the JavaScript libraries that do the real work of making Gmail happen. So for Coursework 3, I thought it'd be good and fun for you to build a single-page web application. And I've sort of given a couple of prescriptive pieces of coursework. So in the first term, you're going to do a game website, I said. In the second term, you're going to do an e-commerce website. So I thought it'd be more fun for you if you chose the single-page web application that you want to build. So it's up to you. Whatever functionality you like, you can put into your website. The restrictions are it can't be an e-commerce website or a client-side JavaScript game. I'll explain there are all kinds of games that you can build that are legitimate, but not a client-side one. You can't hand in Coursework 1 as Coursework 3, obviously. Could be a social networking site, a photo sharing site, file sharing site, like Dropbox, for example, online game playing. I'll give you an example of that. Email, document editing, recipe sharing, so on and so forth. There's many, many things that you could do as a single-page web application. And a good place to look for this is looking at apps, right? The kind of apps on your phone are a lot like single-page web applications, right? You've got an app for weather. You could do a single-page web app for weather, and so on and so forth. Come up with your own ideas. Now, technology, as usual with these pieces of coursework, is constrained, it's specific. So you must write the front end in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and the front end must consist of a single HTML page. And on the server side, you're going to write the server-side functionality using JavaScript running on Node.js. So what Node.js is, it's an execution environment for JavaScript on the server. So you can write JavaScript, it'll run on Node, and that JavaScript will serve up the web pages, interact with databases, and so on and so forth. So you have client-side JavaScript in the browser talking to server-side JavaScript running on Node. And again, there'll be a couple of lectures explaining this technology. Now, the two pieces of JavaScript have to talk to each other, right? And they're going to do this using AJAX, JSON-P, or WebSockets. JSON-P, a little bit unlikely, a little bit unnecessary. Most likely you're going to be using AJAX or WebSockets. And I'll give you a lecture on AJAX. WebSockets is kind of more cool, but possibly more tricky to implement on Node. You must use a database. Again, I thought, well, I've taught you MongoDB. Now, if you like the NoSQL approach, you're welcome to use another NoSQL database, such as Amazon S3, whatever, or that's a kind of document store type NoSQL database, or if you want to hone your SQL skills, then you can use like MySQL or something like that. So I'm leaving this up to you, but the only restriction is that it can't be MongoDB, because we've done enough MongoDB you'll do plenty of MongoDB in the second term. There's no point in just doing the same stuff over again. You're trying to learn these things in this course. Right, so the idea behind Coursework 3 is that you can start it as soon as you've submitted Coursework 1. And these recorded lectures make that possible, right? So the moment you finish Coursework 1, you can watch the lectures on Coursework 3 and watch the lectures on Node and database storage, and then you'll have enough, and possibly some of the lectures on testing and so on. You can work your way through the appropriate lectures to be able to complete Coursework 3 the moment you're ready to start it. So first you submit a proposal. We'll give you feedback about your proposal, tell you, give you some suggestions for, making it doable, for example, in time available, or how to make it better. And once you've got feedback about your proposal, you can start work on the project. You must demonstrate your project to us in the labs before the end of week 24. A partially working demo is fine. I'm going to talk a little bit about the demonstration aspect of it later. But that's an important deadline. We want to see a half-working version or fully working version of your website before you submit it, because there won't be time we can't arrange to sort of see everyone's demos after week 24, because there'll be no lab time to see them in. You must use the specified technology to implement your game. We're not going to give you any marks for Flash. There'll be 0 marks for PHP, 0 marks for storing data with MongoDB, and no marks for additional HTML pages. If you submit a website with 20 HTML pages, we'll give you marks for 1 of them, chosen by us, possibly at random. So don't bother creating lots of HTML pages. There'll be no marks for that. It's all got to be JavaScript. Now, in terms of third-party libraries and frameworks, we're going to give you marks for the functionality that you've done, not the functionality implemented by a third-party library. So by all means, use a third-party library or framework to help you build your project. Use jQuery, use Angular, use Bootstrap, and so on and so forth. But don't use a framework that provides most of the functionality of your website. So, if there's some kind of calendar, well, let's say you copied Google Calendar, for example, and made a few minor tweaks. Okay, you're not going to get any marks for that, or you get a very few marks for the minor tweaks you've done to Google Calendar, not for just producing a copy of a website that exists already. So strongly recommend, if you're planning to use a third-party library or framework that's not one of the standard ones like these three, do discuss it with your module leader before you start your project. Because if you use a framework that does too much of the work, then you're going to lose a lot of marks as well, potentially. So please discuss it with us. If we've given the go-ahead, then no problem, but discuss it with us first. Don't fake it. Obvious, but, don't fake it. We're going to look at your code, okay? If it's obvious that you've just copied the code from somewhere, and we will check, then you're going to lose lots of marks, possibly all your marks, possibly get reported for plagiarism. So don't store data using MongoDB and claim it's stored in MySQL. Be very obvious by looking at your JavaScript server-side code where the data is being stored. Don't use PHP and claim you're using Node. Again, you hand us in a bunch of PHP files. Obviously, it's PHP, right? 10 marks for code quality. So comment the important functionality. Lay out your code tidily. Use sensible variable names. This will help you develop your project. So, we got That's my tidy HTML example with the comments, neat layout, intersections, and so on and so forth. That's my messy HTML example, 0 marks for messy HTML. Tidy JavaScript, each function should have a comment. This is missing a comment here, but and all the important functionality is commented, nicely laid out, easy to read. This will help you develop your projects. Can't repeat it enough. If you're messy with your code, you're going to fail. You just won't be able to build write lots of programs, big programs, right? You'll just get lost. When you come back in a week's time and you look at code that looks like that, you won't know what you did. Okay? If you come back to code that looks like that, you'll know what you did. Again, beauty is important, but it's not essential. There's only about 10 marks from it from what I remember. Cross-browser compatibility, again, don't have to worry about that in this course. Only has to work on a single version of a single browser. I recommend Chrome, but you're welcome to use a different one. Again, demo and local machine's fine. So I'm expecting you to be running Node, like on the command line, something like that, on your local machine, and then you're using the browser on the local machine, and the browser's talking to Node on the local machine. Node doesn't have to be running, on a remote server somewhere. That's not necessary at all. Everything's demoing in a local machine. Your client and your server, both on the same machine, is fine. You're going to be demoing your project before it's finished, so obviously we're not going to worry about minor bugs that mess it up. So we're going to have recorded lectures on JavaScript, testing, Ajax, Node.js, storing data using Node.js. They're going to help you with the basic technologies you're going to need for this project. Then there's going to be Q&A sessions every week. So if you've got questions about this coursework or about any of the coursework, come along to the Q&A session and we'll answer those questions for you. And obviously there'll be laboratory sessions, so you're more than welcome to work on your project during the laboratory sessions, and we can give you feedback about it and help you with any technological problems. Now, Coursework 3 is intended as a challenging project for people who want to get a high mark, okay? So I'm going to cover the basics in these recorded lectures, but you're going to have to manage your own time, right? There's no sort of scheduled time for Coursework 3. There's scheduled time for Coursework 1, scheduled time for Coursework 2. Coursework 3 is something you're going to have to fit in around those times, at the weekends, in the evenings, whatever. You're going to have to manage your own time with Coursework 3 if you want to complete it. You're going to have to work out many things for yourself. I'm throwing in a lecture on Node, and there'll be a lecture on data storage with Node, but the rest you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And this is good preparation for your third year project. Okay, this is a fairly clearly defined project with quite a lot of support. Your third year, you're going to have to do your own project with limited support from your supervisor. So this is a good preparation for getting you in the zone of doing your own projects in your own time and learning a lot about technology as you go. So what you have to submit is a project proposal with 10% of the mark, with the wireframes, short description of project, and the database. That's the end of week 20. As I've said several times, aim to submit this by week 10 so that you can start on it over the holidays. This is the final deadline possible. And if you're struggling with this course in general, I recommend you submit a proposal anyway, because that's still going to get you a few marks, which might be enough to push you over a pass. Then the final submissions, 90% of the mark. In this case, it would be the code and the project report, and the deadline early May. So you use the links on the course website to submit your projects. So here's the Coursework 3 section, which has the description of the coursework, and then the links for submitting the proposal and the final submission. If you're late, or if UniHub's down or something like that, then submit to your module leader by email. If it's CSD 2550, I'm your module leader. If you're on a different module, then you'll find out who your module leader is and submit it to them by email. Only if that's not working, or if it's late. Otherwise, please submit it using the electronic thing, because otherwise it creates a lot of extra work. So the project proposal is just a brief description of the proposed website, describe the database you're planning to use, have put in some wireframe sketches of the website, screenshots of early prototypes, that kind of stuff. And we'll use the project proposal to give you feedback about your idea and help you make it happen in the time available. Again, you're welcome to use the material from the project proposal in the final report. That's not a problem at all. Just submit a Word or PDF version using the link there before the end of week 20 at the very latest, but aim to do it earlier. Final submission, just zip up all the code, images, etc., everything that you need to run the website, include and submit a project report. And again, in the Q&A sessions, I'll explain how these submission links work, because you have 2 tabs. You have a tab for each piece of information you have to submit. In this case, there'll be a tab for the zip file and a tab for the project report. And the deadline early May, so look in the project description, will describe the exact deadlines for your year. Project reports, just a Word or PDF document. Briefly describe the project, includes screenshots of all functionality and a list of third parties that were used, or state clearly somewhere that no third-party libraries were used. Okay, you'll lose the 2 marks, whatever it is, for third-party libraries if you don't accurately state whether you did or didn't use third-party libraries. As usual, don't include screenshots of the code, command line, Dreamweaver, NetBeans, etc., etc., etc. They're not relevant here. We've got the code anyway. Just keep the report descriptive with screenshots of the functionality. So I'm not expecting everyone to complete Coursework 3, but it does build on the skills that you're going to develop by completing Coursework 1. So if you're struggling with this course, don't panic, thinking you've got to do Coursework 3 as well. You can pass this course just by doing Coursework 1 and Coursework 2. Coursework 3 is a more challenging project for people who want to get a first. But if you don't want to get a first, do a solid job on the first 2 bits of coursework and you'll be absolutely fine, okay? You can start on Coursework 3 when you've submitted Coursework 1. When you've demonstrated that you've got the skills for Coursework 3 by completing Coursework 1. So you proving yourself, if you like, with Coursework 1 or getting the skills in Coursework 1 that you'll need for Coursework 3. Because if you can't write JavaScript, you're not going to get anywhere with Node, right? Because Node's all about JavaScript. So if you want to get a good mark for the module, you should submit Coursework 1 as soon as you can. Then you start work on Coursework 3. So you can submit Coursework 1 early and start work on Coursework 3, and then you'll be a little bit ahead of the game. And then in the second term, you can work in parallel on the Coursework 2 group project and the Coursework 3. So aim, if you want a good mark for this course, aim to submit Coursework 3 proposal by the end of week 10. Then we can give you feedback about it in the labs in week 11, and then you can crack on with it over the Christmas holidays. That would be a good time scale, and that still gives you 10 weeks to complete Coursework 1. So to assess your projects, we'll read the project report, we'll read the code, and we'll view a short demonstration of your website during laboratory sessions before the end of week 24. We'll mark the project out of 100, and scale that down to a mark between 0 and 20, which corresponds to 20% of the overall mark for the module. I'm going to mark the project as usual using the assessment criteria included in the project description. So if you want a good mark for your project, I strongly recommend that you read these assessment criteria. And look at these criteria, use them to guide your development of the project. Before you submit your project, use the criteria to mark your project, and then that'll tell you, what functionality you need to add to make your project that little bit better. And do ask us for feedback before submitting your project. Show us your project, we'll look at the criteria, we'll give you a rough mark, and then that'll give you an idea what you need to do if you want to get a better mark, or maybe you'll be finished, right? So do look at these assessment criteria. I'll show you this document at the end. So these are the criteria. So again, all my modules I teach in this way. We have very, very clearly specified functionality, and you need to implement each piece of these functionalities to get the specified marks. And there's also deadlines for each of these different bits of functionality, and the accurate deadline will be available in the project description. So first thing you're going to submit is this project proposal, short description of the project with wireframes or of the design or screenshots of an early prototype. Now, as I said, this is the last possible date for submitting your project proposal for Coursework 3. I strongly recommend you submit it before Christmas. If you want to, it will take time to develop Coursework 3. And by the end, if you want to get a good mark for it, you need to spend that time. So you get 4 marks for describing the functionality, 4 marks for wireframes or screenshots, and 2 marks for listing the databases that your project will use. As I said, any database except for MongoDB is fine. Then we got the front end. So in this case, the front end will be a single HTML page implemented in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So there's no marks for websites with multiple pages. It's a single page web application. So there should be one page called index.index.html, I suppose. And then that'll have links to the JavaScript files that will actually do the main functionality of the website. If you submit a website with 20 pages, we'll pick a page out at random and give you marks for that, okay? So it's 10 marks for attractiveness and usability, so don't focus endlessly on attractiveness and usability. There's only 10 marks for it. Is the front end attractive, well designed, etc.? Has thought been given to usability? Then you got data storage. So I'm expecting you to use a database for this website, and there's 15 marks available for using a website, for using a database. So if you store and retrieve some data in a database, that's not MongoDB, you'll get 5 marks. This can be some very simple data. If you use Node to store and retrieve some data, there'll be like 2.5 marks for storing, 2.5 marks for retrieving. Then you'll get those 5 marks. That's a basic demonstration of competence, if you like, using a database with Node. And then we've got an additional 10 marks if you've got lots of data in the database and it's quite complex data. So if you've got something similar to your e-commerce website with lots of several different kind of collections, whatever, tables, if you're using MySQL, and the tables are linked together and you're pulling out different bits of data from there. So if you've got a substantial amount of data complexity, you can get those 10 marks. Then we're going to be using JavaScript running on Node on the server. So again, here we've got 10 marks for successfully using JavaScript running on Node to deliver the functionality of the website. So the Node will have to serve up the page, and there'll have to be some kind of communication with that page. And then you can get the 10 marks for that. So you're not going to get those 10 marks for just serving up the page. There'll also have to be like some Ajax or WebSockets or something talking to the back end there. So there's no marks for server-side scripts written in PHP or for functionality that requires multiple HTML pages. Okay, so forget about using PHP. This is a Node project. So there has to be front end, back end, communication between the two. That'll give you the 10 marks there, okay? Then we've got 25 marks for the complexity of the website's functionality. So this is a sort of slightly open-ended set of marks. But if you produce something like Gmail or Facebook or some kind of complex chat application, then you can get the full 25 marks. Okay, it kind of scales roughly with the complexity and difficulty of the project that you've attempted. So if you attempt something, really, really tricky and challenging and produce a half-decent job on it, then you can get the 25 marks there. So some of the complexity can be client-side, but some has to be server-side as well. You can't just write a super complex mega game and store the rankings tables in Node, right? In Node in the database. You might get some marks for that, but it has to be at least half the complexity has to be at the back end for you to stand a chance of getting the full 25 marks. Right, so, and then we've got the code quality marks, which you're familiar with by now. We've got like 2.5 marks for HTML code quality, probably not much HTML going to be there. CSS code quality, 2.5 marks, and then 5 marks for JavaScript code quality, because you've got JavaScript on client and server, so the JavaScript's pretty important in this project. Then testing. So Coursework 2 also has marks for testing, and there's a lecture on testing that explains how to do the different kinds of tests. Now in Coursework 2, I'm only expecting you to produce tests, to write tests, but there's no marks for passing the test, okay? But this is Coursework 3, right? This is people who like a challenge, who want to get a first, right? So in this case, you'll get, there's 5 marks for front-end functional testing using Selenium with 1 mark per test, and 5 marks for JavaScript unit tests with 1 mark per test. Now you'll get these 5 marks for Selenium, 5 marks for JavaScript unit tests if you write a test and if your code passes those tests, okay? So you get full marks, 10 marks, if you write 5 of each type of test and all of the tests pass. You'll only get half marks for these tests if you write the tests but the code fails those tests, okay? So full marks for 5 tests for Selenium, 5 tests, full marks for Selenium tests if you write the test and the code passes, and only half marks if the code fails. Then finally, we've got the project report. Briefly describes the project, can reuse material from the project proposal, don't include screenshots of code, the command line, nets, Node.js, complicated output, whatever it is. Don't care. I just want screenshots of the website's pages, content, describe the project clearly, and list the third-party libraries used in the project. Now, we have to see a demonstration of your project. It's a mandatory part of this project. You won't receive a mark for your project unless you demonstrate it to us in the labs. So we need to see a demo so we're confident that you're the person who's written the project. And since this demo will be before the end of the project, we can also give you some helpful feedback and maybe help you to improve it and get a higher mark. So you must demonstrate your project to us in the labs before the end of week 24. We're going to check that your code's written, that it's your code, that it's all your own work, and this is like a couple of weeks roughly before the final demo, depending on when Easter falls. We're not going to mark this demo. The demo is just a mandatory check that you've written the code, haven't paid someone else to write it, and haven't copied it off the internet, okay? So you're only going to be marked, it's the final version of your project that's going to be marked. We're not going to mark the version that we see in the demo. But if you don't demonstrate it, your final submission is going to receive 0 marks if you've not demonstrated before the end of week 24. So you must demo it before the end of week 24, but we're not going to be hard, we're not going to mark it harshly during the demo. We're just going to say, well, that looks good. Thanks for showing us your project. Can you explain this bit to us, and where's it going to go in the next couple of weeks? That's the kind of question we're going to be asking. But you must show it to us or no marks. Now, I completely understand people have personal problems, okay? Maybe you're personally ill, maybe you've got a family member who's ill, maybe you've got financial troubles, and all this kind of stuff. So if you've got personal problems that interfere with your studies, you can apply for deferral of assessment, and this gives you time to complete the coursework, or you can retake an exam without a mark penalty. Now, they've got a whole sort of explanation of that there, and you have to provide documentary evidence. So you fill in the form, you upload the documentary evidence, and experts, in the university somewhere will look at that documentary evidence and make a decision about whether you qualify for deferral of assessment. So I strongly recommend, if you run into personal problems that are interfering with your studies, that you maybe come and talk to your module leader. If you're doing CSD 2550, that's me, and then I'll direct you in this direction. Okay? And then if you get a deferral of assessment, tell me about it, because there's no automatic mechanism whereby I'm kind of alerted to it. So come and see me, make an appointment, have a quick chat about it. I'll recommend this probably, and then you apply for this, you get the deferral of assessment, and then I can give you an extension. In the case of Coursework 3, that's going to be it might have to be like an extension until July, because the deadline falls quite close to the deadline for submitting the marks for the June finalization of the marks thing. So anyway, if you're having personal problems, go down this route, okay? On the other hand, don't come to me with excuses just before the deadline, because I don't generally listen to excuses. That's my rule. If you're having personal problems, follow the deferral of assessment route, but don't come up to me with some kind of excuse like I lost my USB stick, or my car broke down, or or some kind of verbal undocumented statement about how you were ill last Tuesday, because I don't personally give extensions to coursework. Okay, I don't accept excuses, so I strongly recommend that you hand coursework in on time. If you've got a genuine problem, you prove it with documentary evidence to the people who are experts in assessing that documentary evidence. I'm not an expert in assessing that documentary evidence, and so it's no use bringing that kind of thing to me, okay? Come and talk to me about it. I will help you apply for deferral of assessment, but I'm not going to personally give you an excuse unless you've gone through that appropriate channel and it shows up on your university record, okay? So contact your module leader before the deadline if you run into problems. Unless your module leader has given you permission for late submission, or unless you've got a deferral of assessment, the marks available for coursework will halve over 24 hours after the deadline and will be 0 after 1 week. This will be stuck to. If you just sort of submit it late and hope for the best, you're just going to lose marks or get no marks. So plagiarism, as you've probably been lectured about before, and if you watch the Coursework 1 lecture, my position on this, you're basically handing in someone else's work as your own and hoping to get credit for it. So if you submit identical projects to someone else, I'll hand in both people. I'm not going to do detailed investigations. If 2 projects are identical, both students will be reported, and I'll let the university sort it out. If you're found guilty, you have to resubmit your project. Your marks could be capped, or you could be removed from the university. So don't do it. More information there. I realize people work together. That's absolutely fine. Help each other with your projects. What's not acceptable is 2 people working on one project and then submitting it, as their own work. So if you work together with your mate on a single email client, for example, a single email web application, and then one of you calls it B-mail and one of you calls it C-mail, but the code's virtually identical, then you're going to lose marks. So it's not acceptable to collaborate on a project which you submit as individual work. So if you submit a project, so if 2 people submit near identical projects and it's obvious they've worked on the same project together, I'm going to divide the mark between the project. So suppose a project gets a mark of 60% and near identical versions are handed in by 3 people. So instead of getting 60% each, they're going to get 20% because it's effectively a group project with 3 people, and they've just divided up the work that should be done individually in between 3 people. And this only applies to the marks of the parts of the project that are identical. So this has happened in the past, I have enforced this in the past, and I have no hesitation in enforcing this again. Okay. So last little section, I want to give you some ideas. So do some research on single-page websites and apps. Come and talk to us in the laboratory sessions and the Q&A sessions. More than happy to talk about your ideas with you. So apps, as I said, are often a lot like single-page web applications, because they're just typically a single GUI with a few buttons and a lot of back-end functionality. So things like email clients, social networking, document editing, calendars, online multiplayer games, gambling websites, maps, and so on and so forth. So Facebook, as I said, is a nice example where the home page is mostly a single-page web application. Your email client for university is all a single page. Google Calendar, again, single-page web app. Google Docs, you can edit text and all the rest of it within a website. Or, something more fun, right? You could do a poker site where you have multiple people from around the world communicating to a single node server, and, they can play a game together online. So this kind of game's fine because it has a lot of server-side functionality and not much client-side functionality, whereas a poker game that just ran on a single browser would not be acceptable for this project. But one that runs across, would allow people to play across the world, potentially, is absolutely fine. Or some kind of group chat room, right? WebSockets is brilliant for doing chat. So if you can figure out WebSockets on Node, that'd be a nice thing. I think I've never used WhatsApp, but I imagine it's a bit like that. As usual, it's absolutely fine to take ideas from websites and adapt them. It's not fine to take the code from a website and paste it in and a few files and submit it as your own work. You just get 0 marks, and I might report you for plagiarism. It's very obvious when someone's copied something from another website, they don't understand the code, and it's probably broken anyway, particularly in the case of this single-page web app stuff. If we get suspicious about your submitted code, we'll do extensive searches, look at similar websites, search for keywords and all the rest of it, and we'll find the copied website if you've copied it. You're going to get 0 marks if you just copy a website straight off the internet. So, if you'd like more information, there's a document describing Coursework 3 on the course website, has a detailed breakdown of the assessment criteria, and do come along to the Q&A and laboratory sessions if you've got any questions. If you've got sort of specific kind of, detailed questions that you really need to speak to me about, come along to the Q&A session. Otherwise, if you've got questions about technology, then your lab teacher will be able to help you out there. So I'll just show you the, not that. Yeah, so this is the document you should read. Next, it's like the Coursework 3 single-page web application description. It's got the deadlines there, description of the project, what you need to submit, when you need to submit it. And most of all, most important, it's got all the assessment criteria there for you, so you can see exactly what you need to do for your project. Okay. Right, so in this lecture, I've described Coursework 3, the single-page web application running on Node. You can start this as soon as you finish Coursework 1. As soon as you've submitted it, you don't have to wait to be marked as long as you've submitted it. And that's it for Coursework 1. You won't be able to resubmit it. So if you want to attempt Coursework 3, I strongly recommend you submit Coursework 1 as soon as possible. And in the next lecture, we're going to start with the actual technology side of this course. I'm going to start with the HTML.